Every year, the Village of Skaneateles, New York, holds a month-long winter festival, Charles Dickens Christmas. It's a magical time when characters like Father Christmas, Ebenezer Scrooge, and Charles Dickens himself come to life, walk the streets, and make merry with all who visit the town. There's random caroling beside the roads, interactive theater all around, carriage rides, and so much more. This virtual reality video is the first of two parts, and in it we join the character of Washington Irving, demonstrating masterful storytelling skills as he recounts his own best-known ghost story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
And I wrote a story that everyone, I think, probably knows. A Sleepy Hollow, right? Now, storytelling at Christmas, especially ghost stories, might seem like a weird thing to do. But remember the line from that song? There'll be tales of past glories and scary ghost stories from Christmases long, long ago, right? Have you ever wondered why that line is in there? Well, Queen Victoria did a lot of things that we all still do today. She set the trend. The reason that we wear black at funerals, that's because Queen Victoria did it with the whole family. We all did it ever since. The reason you wear a white dress on your wedding day, that's Queen Victoria again. And the reason we celebrate Christmas the way that we do is because of Victoria and Albert. You see, he came from the middle of Europe. And when he married Victoria, they brought a lot of different traditions together under one roof. They were the first people who all as one put up a tree and decorated it, gave out presents, did Christmas cards, caroling, big feasts, acts of charity, the Yule log. All of this was the trends that they set. Now, they didn't invent these things. They came from all over. But they brought them all together as one celebration that we now call Christmas, right? But one thing they did that we don't do anymore is tell ghost stories. You see, all those different cultures that made all those different things, they all did have one thing in common that they all did in the wintertime. They told ghost stories. Because when it's closest to the solstice, when it's dark, when the night is long, the days are short, every culture believed that that's when the spirit world and our world would come together, be at their closest. And so they used to tell stories like that. And those stories were told at Christmas time because it's in the middle of winter. And we stop because now we get our stories different ways. We see them on little things we hold in our hands. We have a special room where we set the thing up to tell us our stories. We go to buildings where they shoot the stories up onto the side of a wall. But before all that, even before everyone had newspapers and everyone had books available to them, we had storytellers. And they would tell the story like I'm about to. My most famous story of Sleepy Hollow. Now there is a place in the Hudson River Valley, just beyond Tarrytown, just north over the hill, there is a valley, a sleepy, quiet place. And if ever I wanted to slip away from all the troubles of my life and the cares of this world, it's hence I would go to. It's called Sleepy Hollow. And a very air permeates it and seeps into the minds of its residents. They're prone to believe wild things and outlandish, marvelous stories, tales of ghosts, goblins, spooks, and specters. They find them in every house, every field, every bridge. The most famous and chief amongst them is that of a headless horseman. Some say he was a Hessian mercenary in the Revolution, and that in some long-forgotten battle now, his head was swept clean off his shoulders by a cannonball. That he's buried in the little church just at the end of the valley, next to the bridge that spans the creek. That every night he issues forth in the darkness to that bloody scene of massacre in search of that missing head, and every day he tarries forth as quickly as possible, lest the daylight should claim him. And it is in this setting that our hero arrives, one Ichabod Crane. Ichabod was a strange man by proportion. He had arms that went out a mile past the end of his sleeves, and his feet were so big, when he walked, you'd think they were shovels to dig earth out of the ground. His clothing hung loose all about him. And indeed, if you watched him walk over a field in the breeze, you might think, there goes some scarecrow, escaped from his field, eloping about the countryside. He had a small head, flat on top, with a long pointed nose. When he turned it, you might think it was a weather vane on the top of a barn. Now Ichabod was the schoolmaster. That means that he was a man of letters and learning and teaching, and it was custom of the itinerant schoolmen to go from community to community and instruct the young gentlemen therein. Ichabod's school was a wood cabin at the base of a hill next to a giant ash tree. You could hear his students every day as they pawn about their lessons like bees humming through the wood. And inside of that hive, the master's stern voice would interrupt them, and occasionally the sharp crack of a birch rod. Now don't think him some schoolmaster tyrant. He merely believed in that old axiom, if you spare the rod, you will spoil the child. But he always knew when to stay his hand. It was custom in those days for teachers to stay with farmers, and he found favor in the eyes of their mothers by, instead of disciplining, showing patience and kindness, especially so if they were single and good cooks. Ichabod was also the sing-master. Every Sunday he would lead the choir, and he would instruct them in voice afterward to all who would attend to him. Now this was not a matter of little vanity, and he prided himself upon his mighty singing voice. And every day you could hear him working away, and all the Sleepy Hollow boys would look on jealously as the young ladies of the hollow would take to him, walking with him by the mill pond as he would sing and recite for them. This continued till one day, after church, a new student arrived, one Katrina Van Tassel, daughter and only child of Botus Van Tassel, the most substantial farmer of the region. Botus was a wealthy man, but not proud in his wealth. Indeed, he was good-hearted, generous to a fault, and caring beyond recognition. Botus's only child was 18. She had a vast beauty, but the only thing more vast were the expectations she had of those who might court her. Chief among her courters was one Abraham von Braun, or Brom, as the Dutch might call him, and due to his great size and Herculean strength of limb, they called him Brom Bones. And indeed, he was a whirlwind of a man, and he would ride his horse Daredevil through the valley every day, kicking up stones, laughing as he went. Now he was a man as much as merriment as of mischief, and he had as much fight as he did frolic within him. Do not think him some beast or bully. Indeed, among his neighbors, he was seen as good-natured, earnest, and trustworthy. And he had long ago set his sights upon Katrina. Everyone knew that if you saw Daredevil out in front of Mynheer Van Tassel's house, you best keep walking by, for he was there courting. But Ichabod was not deterred. He looked past that, past all the barriers that lay before him, and saw the fortune he would inherit if he could marry Katrina. Indeed, the first time he rode out to Van Tassel's farm, his great green eyes rolled back in his head as he beheld the full rich fields, the orchards bursting with fruit, the pastures full of livestock. And all of this would go to the betrothal of Katrina Van Tassel. From that moment forth, his mind was set to work on little else, for Ichabod had a weakness for the opposite sex, so much more so when all they possessed would bring so easy a life to him as well. He set about his work, and as his interest and affections for Katrina grew, it seemed that her affections and interest in Brom waned. Why, every night the schoolmaster was there, around the hours of twilight, which I hear is very helpful to young lovers talking their magic. And they would walk next to the creek while Van Tassel sat in his room smoking. And he would do his best to woo her through the courtly ways of chivalric gallantry. Things continued as thus, and a rift formed between them. Brom spared no chance in insulting his rival. He would trip him in the streets, knock his books from his hands, and every Sunday, as they would gather to sing, Brom and the Sleepy Hollow boys would bring up all the dogs to howl to cover the sounds of his choir. They always had such a vicious eye for each other, but were united in the common pursuit against their new enemy. Then, late in the fall, just as the winter began, a rider in a tow-cloth jacket and a button cap on a shaggy pony rode up to the schoolhouse. He knocked on the door, and then he handed Ichabod an invitation. It was to Mynheer Van Tassel's annual merrymaking and quilting frolic. Now make no mistake, my friends. No quilting ever happened here. No. The pride of the Hollow would gather to drink, eat, dance, and make merry as the winter set in. He quickly started to rush his students through their lessons. They were done an hour sooner than they should be. He pushed them all out the door, threw the latch behind him, and rushed over to his mirror. There he brushed out his only suit, making sure it had no holes. He checked himself in his looking glass, a broken bit that he had found when he had moved into the school, and he adjusted his locks to look just so, and to appear evermost the gallant cavalier. He borrowed a horse from the farmer that he was staying with, a broken-down nag, whose old life had outgrown everything but its own viciousness. Its name was Gunpowder, a name that belied the spirit it had in its youth. And though it appeared broken and worn, in its eyes, the glint of the devil might still be seen. He mounted and rode and approached the house of Van Tassel. There he gave his horse over to the stable boy and walked through the front doors. And as he threw the doors open, light, sound, and smell, and the bounty of Van Tassel burst upon him. The guests, making their way past the tables filled with the delights that only the old Dutch wives know how to make. Donuts, crullers, buckles, and pies. Ichabod was a man who delighted in food, the same way that another man might delight in the drink, and he was never as happy as when his plate was full and another had handed it to him. And as he sat and ate, he could not help but imagine himself as Van Tassel is now, walking amongst his guests, so generous a host, telling all to fall to and have at the life that awaited him as soon as his marriage to Katrina was complete. Once eating was done, music was called for. They retired away to the parlor for dancing, his third best quality. He asked Katrina for this dance, and off they went, like St. Vincent himself. Not a limb was still. All was akimbo to the rhythm of music, and as he danced, he could not help but smile. Things were going so well. There he was, with his lady love, all of his prospects laid before him. And Brom Von Bones in the corner, staring on, with eyes filled with lonely love, bitter jealousy. After the dancing was finished, Van Tassel's favorite activity occurred. All were taken to the back room, and the candles were turned off, leaving only the light of the fire. And the old Dutch wives gathered around to tell the ghost stories that filled the hollow. They told many, but in the end, they all fell back to that most fearsome haunt, the dark goblin rider, the headless horseman. The tale was told of Brower, a man who had no superstition in him. He did not believe in ghosts. Spooks were things of myth. Till one night he met the horseman. It chased him, he claimed, clean through the valley, always just at the back of his neck. He swore he could smell the brimstone. of his horse breathing hot upon him. And just as he crossed the bridge next to the old church, he was knocked from his steed, thrown over end and into the creek, and he emerged just in time to hear a clap of thunder, and with a flash of fire, like the green upon the horizon, the rider shot off into the sky. Brum, not to be outdone, and ever the braggart said he had seen the horseman, challenged him to a race. I was going to win a bowl of punch from that dark spectre, but as soon as we had reached the bridge, I heard a clap of thunder behind me, and in a flash, a brimstone disappeared, consumed, and gone back to the hells from which she had came. These stories seeped into the mind of Ichabod. For while he was an intelligent and learned man, there was a gullibility about him for the supernatural. He had an appetite for macabre and the horror, and his bite could not be sated, for ever he wanted more and darker. These stories, they're so easy to hear next to a warm fire with friends, so difficult when we remember them alone on the dark, lonely walk home. At the end of the night, the farmers gathered up their wives, their children, put them on their wagons, and off they went over the hills to their homes. Young bucks jumped upon their horses and bid their paramours join them, and to the calls of "Be back before dark," they rode off to find a few moments together alone. To lonely Ichabod remained behind, to have a meeting, a tete-a-tete with Katrina Van Tassel. Now, he thought, was his time. Nobody knows what happened. All we know is that the meeting was short, and he exited as dismal and gloomy as the night was about him. He did not look left, he did not look right, he did not even look up. He walked straight off to the barn, collected old gunpowder, hopped up on the back, and rode off into the night. The night was dark. It grew darker still. By the very stars themselves, they seemed to recede away into the blackness, till only the moon was left, obscured by the clouds. As he rode, he tried to whistle a psalm tune to himself, as his nerves began to race, and then suddenly his horse, it stopped. And he looked about him, and he realized he was in that place. He was in that very place where all those dark tales occurred. His heart began to pound inside of him. His breath began to quicken, his brow began to sweat. He was nervous, and so he kicked gunpowder hard in the ribs, but that old nag did not go forward. It pulled to the right, smashing him into a fence, and so he jerked the reins back to the left, and the horse, instead of rising upon the road, flew off the other side, into a briar, through a bramble in a thicket. It tore at his clothes, it pulled at his scarf, and just as he struggled to get back on the road, the horse stopped so suddenly, he was nearly thrown over the front. But there, next to him on the path, was a figure. Oh, imposing, and as dark as the night was about him. Ichabod looked to discern his features, but he could not. So he called out, "Who are you?" The shape made no reply. He summoned up all of his courage that he had left in him. "Who are you?" he demanded. Silence was his only answer. Remembering all the tales and wanting no mischief to follow him this night, he urged gunpowder forward, and the old horse complied. And just as it went past the dark shape, the shape began to move. It began to follow him, always just behind him. Ichabod tried to ride faster, but the shape increased its speed. He tried slowing again to let it pass, but it slowed down. Never far, never near, but always there. And just as they came over a hill, he looked back behind him, and the clouds parted, and he could see the shape outlined by the pally moon. It was a rider, tall, broad-shouldered, with a cloak gathered about him. The steed he sat upon, black, muscular, and darker still, with eyes that burned like coal embers. And as he looked up, to his horror he perceived there was no head. There was no head upon his shoulders where it should be. And worse still, my friend, the head, it was not gone, no. It was tied about the pommel of his saddle, a grisly, bloody trophy, grim and dangling as the horse stood and breathed. Ichabod screamed for his life. He urged his horse forward, and gunpowder flew like the wind. Fear driving it faster than it ever thought it could go before, and the rider set off forth just behind him. Through the valley they rode, kicking up stones, sparks and dirt flying, and the saddle beneath him began to give way. Ichabod tried to keep it on, but it was no use, and as the saddle slipped, he threw his arms around the neck of Gunpowder. The rider trampled the saddle behind him. Fire and cracking wood as the sound of it broke. And as he rode on, he was panicked for his life, but then he looked up and he saw the bridge, the river, the church. The storm. If I could just make it past that bridge, surely, he thought, I'd save half a score of kicks to his ribs. And Gunpowder remembered his old mettle. The horse thundered over the wood, planks flinging up behind him, and just as he crossed the threshold, Ichabod, he could not help himself. He wanted to look back, to see the dark spectacle he had been promised. And when he turned, oh, the rider, he was there as he reared up his horse, as he lifted aloft that bloody head, and as he flung it at Ichabod, it struck him clean on. He tumbled down from the horse, and Gunpowder, dark steed, and goblin rider passed by in the night. The next morning, the old farmer opened the door and saw Gunpowder there, in the front yard without his saddle, chomping away at the grass. He led the horse back to the barn, went inside, he laid out the breakfast, but Ichabod never came down. That day, all the boys gathered at the school, but no schoolmaster arrived to let them in. That night when supper was laid, there was no Ichabod. An inquiry was laid out, an investigation was made. They found the tracks all through the valley along the road, the stones that had been flung up. They found the broken saddle, the boards over the bridge. They even found Ichabod's hat next to the tree, with shattered pieces of what might be a gourd or perhaps a pumpkin. They dredged the river. They searched the woods. They never found Ichabod. Now, some people claim that Ichabod ran away to the big city to the south, that he spent the rest of his days there hiding, shame, fear, and eventually died an old man of the law. And it is true. Brum Bum Bones had his moment of triumph as soon as Ichabod disappeared. He married Katrina Van Tassel. And when they would tell the story of Ichabod Crane, a smile would come across his face. He would laugh whenever the pumpkin was mentioned. People thought he knows something. But the truth is all you have to do is ask the old Dutch wives. They know the truth. They always do. They'll tell you what really happened that night. Ichabod was taken, spirited away by the headless horseman. And that the bridge beyond, next to the church, it's evermore an object of fear, awe, and superstition. No one uses it. Don't go near the old schoolhouse at night. If you do, you might still hear Ichabod whistling to himself, trying to calm his panicked heart. These are the kinds of stories that they'll tell you if you ever go to the quaint village of Sleepy Hollow. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for sticking around for the length of my my story in the cold here. I really, really appreciate it. Storytelling is a thing that we don't do anymore, but we all used to do. So this year at Christmas, I would ask, when you get together with your friends, when you get together with your family, turn off your devices, put away all that stuff just for a few minutes, and tell a story. It could be about the nativity, it could be a different Christmas story. It doesn't even have to do with Christmas. It could be about your family, or your history, or your culture, because storytelling is how we directly pass these values and things that we love on to people that we love. So take the time to do that, and I would very much appreciate it if we kept storytelling alive. There's a lot left to do today. You can go up and get roast chestnuts up by the Chamber of Commerce. You can go find Father Christmas down at the Masonic Temple. You can find Mother Goose over at Loft 42. And right here at 2 o'clock, we will be doing the Christmas Caroling Revels, where we will have a little contest during 12 Days of Christmas and hold our raffle this year. Thank you once more. Have a great day at Dickens Christmas.